This happened about 2 summers ago when my friend Jake and I decided to go camping in northern Arizona. We had both been working long weeks and wanted to get out of the city for a couple of days. Jake suggested we drive up near Kabob National Forest, a place he had camped once before with his uncle. According to him, it was quiet, beautiful, and usually pretty empty. Which is exactly what we wanted. We left Phoenix early in the afternoon and drove for about 4 hours. By the time we reached the forest roads, the sun was already starting to go down. The area looked exactly like you'd imagine a remote campsite would look. Tall pine trees everywhere, long dirt roads cutting through the forest, and almost no other people around. We drove another 15 minutes down one of the dirt roads until we found a small clearing that looked perfect for camping. It had enough space for the truck, a fire pit that someone had built out of rocks, and plenty of trees around for shade.
Engines on.
But what I remember noticing first was how quiet the place was. Not the normal peaceful kind of quiet. More like the kind of silence where it feels like the entire forest is just watching. At the time, though, I didn't think too much about it. We parked the truck, set up our tent, and started a small campfire as the sky turned dark. For the first hour, everything felt normal. We cooked some food, listened to music quietly, and talked about work and random stuff. By around 10 p.m., the fire had burned down to glowing coals, and the forest around us had become almost completely black, and the only light came from our small lantern and the remaining fire. Jake eventually said he was going to sleep. He crawled into the tent while I stayed by the fire for a few more minutes, just enjoying the quiet. That's when I heard the first sound. It was faint, somewhere in the trees, like a branch snapping. At first, I assumed it was just an animal, maybe a deer or something moving through the forest. That's pretty normal when you're camping. But then I heard it again. Another branch snapping, and this time it sounded closer. I looked toward the dark trees beyond the firelight, but I couldn't see anything. Just rows of tall black tree trunks disappearing into darkness. For a moment, everything was silent again. Then I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Like someone walking carefully through the forest floor. My first thought was that maybe another camper was nearby. But that didn't make much sense. We hadn't seen another car on that road for miles. I stood up slowly and looked deeper into the trees. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. The footsteps stopped. The forest became silent again. After about 30 seconds, I told myself I was probably overreacting. Maybe it really was just an animal moving around. I added a few pieces of wood to the fire and watched the flames grow brighter. Then something happened that made my stomach tighten. From the corner of my eye, I saw something move between the trees. Very quickly. Like someone stepping behind a trunk to hide. I turned my head immediately and stared into the darkness. But again, I couldn't see anyone. The fire crackled quietly behind me. The forest was still. Then, about 20 yards away, I saw it. A shape, standing between 2 trees. It looked like a person, completely still, watching our campsite. For a moment, I thought maybe it was Jake messing with me, but that didn't make sense. Jake was inside the tent, and the shape in the trees hadn't moved at all. I squinted, trying to see better in the darkness. And that's when the figure slowly stepped back behind the tree and disappeared, too. For a few seconds, I just stood there staring into the trees. My brain was trying to convince me that what I saw wasn't actually a person. Maybe it was just the shadows from the fire moving around. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark. But something about the way that figure moved felt too deliberate, too human. I looked toward the tent where Jake was sleeping. Part of me wanted to wake him up right away, but another part of me didn't want to sound crazy if it turned out to be nothing. So instead, I grabbed the flashlight from the camping table and pointed it toward the trees. The beam cut through the darkness. Tree after tree lit up in the white light. But there was no one there. Just dirt, pine needles, and tall trunks disappearing into the forest. I stood there for another minute listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no branches snapping, just the quiet forest again. Eventually, I convinced myself it had probably been an animal, or maybe even just my imagination. I put the flashlight down and sat back near the fire. But now the silence felt different. It didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt tense, like something was out there, waiting. A few minutes later, I crawled into the tent and zipped it closed. Jake was already asleep, snoring quietly in his sleeping bag. "Jake," I whispered. He didn't move. I considered waking him up but decided against it. Instead, I lay down in my sleeping bag and tried to relax. For a while, everything was quiet. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time they were closer. Much closer. They were coming from somewhere just outside the circle of firelight. My heart immediately started racing again. I slowly sat up inside the tent and listened carefully. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard something brushing against one of the trees nearby, like someone shifting their weight. I looked toward the tent wall facing the forest. From inside the tent, the fire outside created a faint orange glow through the fabric. And against that glow, I could see a shadow. Someone was standing just outside the firelight. The shape moved slightly, and then it disappeared again. At that point, I grabbed Jake's shoulder and shook him. "Jake," I whispered urgently. "Wake up." He groaned and rolled over. "What?" he mumbled. "There's someone outside." That woke him up fast. He sat up immediately and looked toward the tent wall. "Someone outside the tent?" he asked. I saw them in the trees earlier," I said quietly. "And I just saw a shadow again." For a moment, Jake didn't say anything. Then he slowly reached over and grabbed the small camping knife we kept near our bags. "Maybe it's another camper," he whispered. "Maybe," I said. But neither of us sounded convinced.
"All right, time to head out."
Jake slowly unzipped the tent just enough to look outside.
Let's go.
The fire was still glowing faintly in the pit. The clearing around our campsite looked empty. The trees stood silent and dark. Jake stepped halfway out of the tent and shined the flashlight around the clearing. Nothing. No one behind the truck, no one near the trees, no movement at all. He turned back toward me. "I don't see anyone." I was about to respond when something moved again in the forest.
Gotta move fast, no time.
Both of us saw it this time. A figure stepped between two trees about 30 yards away, just barely visible in the darkness. And the worst part was,
Hurry, we have to go
the person
now.
wasn't walking away. They were standing there, watching us. Jake pointed the flashlight straight at the figure. But the moment the beam hit the trees, the person quickly stepped back into the darkness and disappeared again. Jake lowered the flashlight slowly. "Okay," he said quietly. "That definitely wasn't an animus." 3. Final. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Jake kept the flashlight pointed at the trees where the figure had just been standing. The beam shook slightly in his hand. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "Yeah," I said. "I told you someone was out there." The forest went completely silent again. No footsteps, no branches moving, just the faint crackling sound of the dying fire. Jake slowly stepped out of the tent and walked toward the fire pit. I followed a second later. The clearing suddenly felt much smaller than it had earlier that evening. Jake kept sweeping the flashlight across the trees. Left, right, back and forth. Nothing. "Maybe it's someone messing with us," he said quietly. "Why would someone just stand out there watching?" I asked. Jake didn't answer. He kept scanning the trees. But then something happened that made both of us freeze. From somewhere deeper in the forest, we heard a whistle. A short, sharp whistle. It lasted only a second, but it was loud enough that there was no mistaking it. Jake and I both looked in the direction it came from. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Yeah." The whistle came again. But this time, it came from a different direction. My stomach dropped. That meant whoever was out there had moved. Or worse, there was more than one person. Jake must have realized the same thing because he slowly turned the flashlight toward the other side of the clearing. The beam moved across the trees. Then it stopped. There, between two trees, another figure, standing perfectly still. The person was about 30 or 40 yards away. I am just at the edge of where the flashlight barely reached. And they weren't hiding this time. They were just standing there, watching us. Jake raised the flashlight higher. "Hey," he shouted, "who's out there?" The figure didn't respond. It didn't move. It just stood there. Then suddenly it stepped behind a tree and disappeared again. Jake lowered the flashlight slowly. "That's it," he said quietly. "We're leaving." I didn't argue. Neither of us felt safe staying there anymore. Jake quickly grabbed the truck keys while I started stuffing our gear into bags. We didn't even bother putting everything away properly. We just threw things into the back of the truck as fast as we could. The whole time, Jake kept shining the flashlight toward the trees.
Wake up. Something's outside.
It felt like the forest was closing
What
in
is it?
around us.
Shh,
In
listen.
every
It's
shadow
getting
looked
closer.
like someone hiding.
I hear it. What do we do?
Every small
quiet.
sound made us jump.
Grab the flashlight.
Finally, Jake climbed into the driver's seat while I jumped into the passenger side. The truck engine started with a loud rumble that echoed through the trees. Jake turned the headlights on. The powerful beams lit up the entire clearing. For a moment, everything looked normal again. Just trees, dirt, our empty fire pit. Then Jake slowly turned the truck toward the dirt road leading out of the forest. As the headlights swept across the trees one last time, both of us saw something that made my skin crawl. There were two people standing in the forest. Not one, two. Both of them were standing far apart from each other, partially hidden between the trees, watching the campsite, watching us, and neither of them moved when the headlights hit them. Jake didn't say a
Hurry,
word.
we have to go now.
He just pressed the gas and
trying,
drove
this is
straight
heavy.
for the dirt
Just
road.
throw it in the truck.
The truck bounced over the rough ground as we
done. Watch
sped
the
away
fire.
from the clearing.
Let's go.
In the rearview mirror, I could still see the headlights lighting up the forest behind us. And for a split second, I thought I saw one of the figures
Hey,
step
who's
forward
out
from
there?
the trees.
What is it? What
We
do you
drove
see?
for almost 20 minutes before we
Something
reached the
moved.
main road
Over
again.
there.
I don't see
Only
anything.
then did Jake finally slow down. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then Jake said something that made the whole situation even creepier. "You know what the weirdest part was?" "What?" I asked. He kept his eyes on the road. "They never said anything. They never came closer." "Yeah," I
There it is
said.
again.
"So what were they
It's come
doing?"
from on the right this time.
Jake shook his head. I
Shine
think
the
they
light
were
over
waiting."
there.
"Waiting for what?" He paused for a second before answering. "For the fire to go out."